a crisis heats up, Iceland lowering the voting age, an arthritic Puffin, and more on this episode of the Reykjavik News Desk. First up on the Reykjavik News Desk, it looks like Parliament is going to have a heated opening session. And by that I mean Minister of Justice Guðrún Hafsteinsdóttir has announced that she is working on a bill that she intends to introduce to Parliament in the fall session on her residential solution with limitations, as she calls it, for those who have applied for international protection in Iceland but got their applications rejected. So in case you missed it, some 50 people are now houseless in Iceland as a result of changes made to the law on foreigners last spring. The major change to this law is that those denied international protection in Iceland by the Directorate of Immigration, despite their right to appeal their case in an Icelandic court of law, are to be denied access to essential services such as healthcare, shelter, and food if they do not agree to leave the country within 30 days. Importantly, even though they would like to work, applicants for international protection are forbidden by law from working in Iceland. This has effectively caused a human rights crisis in this country, but Guðrún has stuck to her guns, insisting that this residential solution with limitations is a fair compromise and that these are people who need to take personal responsibility. So there are many problems with this. First of all, when Guðrún was pressed by reporters to explain what exactly would be entailed in this residential solution with limitations, whether or not she was talking about, locking people up. She explained that residents, some of them would be able to come and go as they pleased by using, for example, an armband, which would allow them access to and from the front gates. Yes, just so you know where her mentality is at right now. Another problem is that the minister is grossly oversimplifying the situation. Social Democrat MP Helga Vala Helgadóttir broke this down really well by pointing out that when we talk about people whose applications for international protection have been denied, we can essentially talk about three types of people. That is, those who then leave the country willingly, those who leave the country unwillingly, and the very, very few who are unable to go anywhere. And they're unable to go anywhere because they do not have the proper documentation. Like they fled war or human trafficking without any documentation, or they have expired documentation, and so on. These are people who literally have nowhere else to go. And they are very, very few. We're talking about dozens, maybe, but most importantly, they are human beings. These are people who just want to make a life for themselves in Iceland. They want to work. And in many cases, they've already established roots here. I mean, some of these people have been in Iceland for years now. So Guðrún's characterization ignores these people and puts them in an indefinite legal limbo, wherein they're locked up in a residential solution, albeit maybe one where they could leave now and then thanks to an armband that they're required to wear. Anyway, NGOs across the country, from the Red Cross to UNICEF to the Bishop of Iceland herself, have urged the government to do away with this 30-day law, saying that it's created a humanitarian crisis and you have to find a more humane solution. Minister of Social Affairs Guðmundur Ingi Guðbrandsson, who met with these NGOs in a special meeting, said that while, yes, people are entitled to question Guðrún's residential solution, that her idea deserves the parliamentary treatment. And this is exactly what historians mean when they say that authoritarians are able to rise to power because of apologists who act as human shields, that is, defending the ascendant authoritarians from their critics. But Parliament won't be starting for another few weeks now, and the Independence Party have been threatening to break up the ruling coalition if the Left Greens give them any more flack, and frankly, the Left Greens are really not in a position to push their luck. But who knows? We're talking about Icelandic politics here. Pretty much anything can happen. Even such unlikely things as a political party which abandoned everything it ever stood for in order to gain and stay in power, suddenly growing a conscience and a spine. But we'll see. Next up, a new report on the economics of fin whale hunting has been released, and I hope you're sitting down. Are you? Good, because here's the conclusion. Hunting fin whales is not profitable. It loses money. And in fact, it has little to no impact on the economic life of Iceland. Pretty shocking stuff, I know, especially as fin whaling is the hobby of a single multimillionaire in this country. And has no historic or cultural roots and has no domestic market. My favorite thing about this story, though, is that the millionaire in question, Christian Lawson, when asked to comment on this report, hand-waved it saying, "There's nothing new in this report," which is like, so you agree, hunting fin whales is a pointless endeavor. Actually, I don't think he would agree, but yeah. So while we may have some problems with how democracy works in Parliament, democracy is very much alive and well on the municipal level through a thing known as íbúakosningar, which is literally residential elections, but is more like a municipal referendum. And these are my favorite kinds of elections because this is a chance for everyday people to vote on things like city planning and ordinances, you know, just everyday stuff that affects your local community and yourself directly. Well, a new bill that is due to hit Parliament this autumn may make those elections even more democratic. You see, if this bill is passed into law, these residential elections would be held every 2 to 4 weeks. There could be mobile polling places. It would be possible to mail in your ballots. And perhaps most radically of all, the voting age for these residential elections would be lowered from 18 to 16. What's the thinking here, you may be wondering? Well, it has a lot to do with Iceland's education system. You see, you've got play school, primary school, secondary school, and university. And compulsory education ends at the end of primary school. And most people are 16 years old when they graduate from primary school. A lot of these folks will just immediately enter the workforce and start paying taxes. And so, yeah, they have every right to participate in residential elections. Now, if they lower the voting age to 16 for Parliament, well, the right wing will certainly be in trouble. Maybe that's why they've been so opposed to that idea. It's a mystery. I got some sad animal news for you, so be sure to have some tissues handy. This is Karin, and Karin is a very young puffin who was brought to Sea Life Trust in the Westman Islands. Now, puffins are very common in the Westman Islands, although their numbers have been struggling for a while. But what makes Karin special is that she has arthritis. I know. She can swim just fine, but walking her causes her trouble, like she'll limp, and it gives her a lot of pain. Fortunately, there are experts on hand who are working with her, and even though she spends her nights sleeping alone, during the day, she gets to swim around with her other puffin friends. My heart. Finally, on the Reykjavik news desk, fire struck in Hafnarfjörður in an industrial building where 17 people were registered as being residents. And while, fortunately, no one was killed or seriously injured, this place was never coded for human habitation. In fact, it was on the fire department's list of places to inspect. Now, I've pointed out in other videos how there are some unscrupulous property owners who will rent out a property, usually to immigrants, that are unfit for human habitation, and sometimes that can result in tragedy. Unfortunately, the law actually restricts how much power the fire department has to inspect and condemn such structures. Now, if I had my way, the fire department would be allowed to follow tips and inspect a building that people are living in. And if it turns out the structure is unfit for human habitation, the property owner would not only have to pay for getting it up to code, but also return the security deposits to the residents and pay for putting them up in a hotel in the meantime. But I don't decide these things. However, there is one bright spot to this story. You see, one of the residents of this building was a cat named Kota, which means pillow. Now, when Kota went missing, people were naturally worried because he's an indoor cat and also was only 6 months old. He's a baby. Well, since I'm using the present tense, you've probably figured out that yes, they did find Kota safe and sound. And thank goodness for that. However, what measures the government is going to take to crack down on these sleazy property owners still remains to be seen. And that's all I have for you today on the Reykjavik News Desk. Be sure and like and subscribe. And just as a reminder, my next Ask Me Anything session will be September 16th at 1600 GMT or noon Eastern Standard Time. Now, the Ask Me Anything sessions are for patrons, and it's a chance for, well, me to be asked anything, but also mostly a chance for us to just hang out and have a laugh. It's always a lot of fun. Be really cool to see you there. Also, I'm pleased to announce the results of the viewer poll are in. Now, the viewer poll is something else for patrons wherein they get to vote to decide what my next single topic video is going to be about. And the winner on this occasion was my time in Icelandic politics. That's right. I was a parliamentarian many, many years ago, and I'm going to do a video about what that experience was like and what I learned during my time there. And that video will be dropping at some point in September. I'll keep you posted. But the main thing is that the Ask Me Anything and the viewer poll are two of the things that you can get by signing up for my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marianne Ward, Christopher Hunter, Marianne Moores, Kimberly McDaniel, Iceman98, Octavia Hun Jonsdottir, and Alan Vagame for being patrons on the $20 level, Ian Kingsley and Laura Johnson for being patrons on the $15 level, and Melissa Pfeffer, Christine Trowbridge, Havstein Himenjomi Regenosson, Stephen Ellis, and Vivi Carvajal Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. You folks rock. That's all for me at News Desk. Be good to each other.